Thank you, Chairman Raskin, Ranking Member Mace, and distinguished members of the committee. As the former cannabis czar for the state of Colorado and a policy professional having advised nearly 20 governments, it is an honor to join today's discussion on the need for federal cannabis reform. When Colorado voters approved a ballot initiative in 2012 legalizing adult-use cannabis, the then governor and present U.S. Senator John Hickenlooper appointed me to lead the state's efforts to implement its new law and to oversee the medical cannabis and hemp programs. I have had a front-row seat to one of the most remarkable political phenomena and federalism experiments in modern American democracy. Last week, as we marked the 10th anniversary of Colorado's passage of its adult-use cannabis initiative, we saw voters in 2 more states legalize adult-use cannabis, including in the very red state of Missouri. Today, roughly half of Americans live in the 21 states in the District of Columbia that have legalized adult-use cannabis, and there are a total of 37 states that have legalized cannabis for medicinal use. Prohibition is no longer the law of the land, even as it remains federal law. While voters from across the political spectrum agree that federal prohibition has failed as badly as alcohol prohibition did a century ago, other motivations for legalization vastly vary. In the last 10 years, I have advised rural counties that were interested in licensing cultivation facilities so their farmers could participate in the market, large East Coast cities that were concerned with ensuring minority-owned businesses were first to get licensed, and states that prioritized safe access for medical cannabis patients. Throughout this work, one fact remained constant. States were critically hampered in achieving their goals and mitigating their concerns without federal reform. So, in 2020, we founded the Coalition for Cannabis Policy, Education, and Regulation, or CPEAR, to embrace a simple reality. Cannabis reform is here to stay, and it is time for the federal government to institute regulatory, public health, public safety, and criminal justice policies that respect and align with the states. The coalition consists of members representing regulated industries, think tanks, government associations, public safety officials, medical and mental health professionals, financial services firms, and social equity organizations. Together, this coalition strives to be a trusted, data-driven resource for lawmakers and the larger stakeholder community. CPEAR does not advocate that a state should or should not legalize cannabis. States should remain free to determine what, if any, form of legalization they wish to pursue. But where states have decided to pursue cannabis reform, and even in states where cannabis remains illicit, the federal government should provide regulatory guardrails. States are demanding this. This committee is asking the right question. How can changes to federal law help the cannabis policy landscape? For instance, to combat driving under the influence of cannabis, federal policy is critical to augment and improve drug recognition expertise, create universal intoxicating standards, and to fast-track the implementation of new impairment detection technologies. Congress can combat youth misuse by supporting youth programming that works, establishing a national minimum purchasing age of 21, drawing upon best practices of point-of-sale age verification, and restricting advertising that targets youth. To combat the illicit market, states have implemented track and trace inventory control systems to monitor cannabis products throughout the supply chain. Reform requires a unified federal and state response. That means federal reform efforts should supplement and integrate with existing state systems. There are dozens of issues where federal engagement is critical, including addressing mental health concerns, conducting research, restricting unproven health claims, preventing substance abuse known as cannabis use disorder, and maintaining safe access for patients and veterans. This is not to say the entire federal government isn't paying attention. Ranking Member Mace, present today, has championed the States Reform Act, which provides a federal regulatory framework for cannabis. Representative Ocasio-Cortez co-leads the Harnessing Opportunities by Pursuing Expungement, or HOPE Act, an important bill for those impacted by prohibition. Both of these bills have CPEAR support. Ranking Member Comer has championed the federal effort to provide regulatory clarity to the U.S. hemp industry. As Kentucky's Commissioner of Agriculture, he implemented hemp pilot programs permissible per the 2014 Farm Bill. He has secured provisions in the 2018 Farm Bill for fully legalizing the crop. He has since conducted regulatory follow-up and oversight of the U.S. Food and Drug Administration. Today's hearing is a testament to your further commitment to get bipartisan federal cannabis reform done right. To aid the committee in discussing cannabis reform, CPEAR has entered 4 policy papers into our written statement. These present a framework for small and minority-owned businesses, solutions for mental health and substance abuse, a plan to prevent youth misuse, and policies to combat driving under the influence of cannabis and other drugs. I thank you for your time today and look forward to answering any questions you may have today or in the future.
Now turning to you, Mr. Freedman, in your time as Colorado's first marijuana czar, what economic impact, both on companies and customers, did you observe when legal cannabis companies were unable to access banks? And also, you know that the congressman from Colorado, Congressman Perlmutter, has advocated a federal law to allow banking services to those states that have legalized marijuana. Could you comment on both of these issues, please?
Thank you, Chairwoman. At the beginning of us instituting or implementing cannabis legalization in Colorado, it was the situation where there would literally be duffel bags full of cash that could not get paid, that could not be entered into depository institutions. We had to get a larger window for receiving cash for state taxes. There was a lot of good news. People were very happy about the amount of tax revenue that was coming in and how these businesses were doing, but there was certainly a scary time where merchant services hadn't stepped up. We fortunately did have a number of community banks in Colorado that have since stepped up and done that sort of banking, and merchant services now are largely taken care of, although at a cost in Colorado as those community banks go forward. And Representative Perlmutter has really been the leader on this issue with safe banking and with other issues. And I think it points to a larger issue in cannabis, which is common sense public health and public safety issues such as banking, such as insurance, and even things like proper pesticide use. None of those things can really be addressed because they're all overseen by the federal government unless we're dealing with a world of descheduling and regulation. Thank you for your question.
And so, Mr. Freedman, let me come to you because you've had a lot of experience with this at the state level and at the local level. Do you think the country is living through a transformation like the end of Prohibition, and we're discovering what it means to enter the post-marijuana Prohibition era governmentally and commercially at the same time?
Thank you, Chairman. I would go as far to say they've already gone through that as the people of the United States. I think for the vast majority of consumers and patients who now deal with cannabis, they deal with it in what they view as a post-Prohibition world. Kind of the last people to consider post-Prohibition is the Hill and Congress and the United States. The fact is, kind of the only things missing now are the sort of common sense regulation and science that our institutions of government could bring to it.
So, Mr. Freedman, are you aware that the FDA has failed for several years now to promulgate regulations that would provide certainty in the market for the hemp industry, especially with respect to products containing CBD?
Thank you, Ranking Member Comer. Yes, I agree with your analysis. First of all, that the rules and regulations regarding hemp will have a tie to cannabis. If we don't get hemp right, it's going to be very hard to get cannabis right. And that we did legalize hemp without the FDA so far has not created a pathway for the vast majority of products that are used for CBD, nor have they created regulations around intoxicating cannabinoids that are now coming out of hemp as well, and that there is a lack of leadership that is now needed from that we are now search to champions like you for that sort of progress forward.
And let me be very clear. I'm a Republican. I'm against excessive regulations. But here we have an industry that all of the credible players want regulation because, you know, if there's a bottle of CBD at a gas station, there's no one that's there to determine whether that's CBD or not. When it says how many milligrams of whatever is in it, there's no agency that's looking into that to make sure that that's accurate reporting. So, you know, what I think we want with the CBD industry is we want that to be treated like a nutraceutical, to where, you know, you go in GNC, Vitamin World, places like that, and you buy nutraceuticals as opposed to pharmaceutical. And you look on the label and it says, you know, exactly what's in that bottle or of CBD. We don't have that. And the credible people in the CBD industry, and not everyone's credible, and that's the problem. That's why we need some type of regulatory certainty here. The credible CBD producers, which there are probably 3 dozen in my congressional district and in Kentucky, they want some type of regulatory certainty, and so they can move forward. Now, Mr. Chairman, here's a letter dated April 14th where I requested a committee hearing with Chairwoman Maloney with the FDA to talk about this specific issue, to try to get some regulatory certainty in this industry, because you don't go in a store where you don't see a bottle of CBD, but there's no guarantee that that's CBD. That may be snake oil. That may be something else. I take CBD from labs I have been to in Kentucky where I know that they're producing a product that was grown on Kentucky farms and that has gone through a very credible lab. So can you elaborate on that? I've got 30 seconds here as to what FDA is going to do in the future. And let me say this, I predict that there will be a hearing on CBD oil in the very near future in this committee, but go ahead.
Thank you, Ranking Member. My prediction is that so far all of that I've read coming out of the FDA is that they're going to be turning it back to Congress to solve these problems, and people like you for leadership here in that. I think the problem is real. Consumers don't know what they're getting, that some bad actors have turned to intoxicating cannabinoids and selling.
And we saw that in the pods for the e-cigarettes and things like that. Yeah.
And people need rules of the road to get this right. And I believe it's not only critical for the hemp industry, but the burgeoning cannabis industry as well. These things are so interrelated at this point that you will end up seeing bad actors escape the cannabis industry and go to the hemp industry because the laws and regulations are looser and they haven't created a clear path to market. So I do believe this is a place where good actors and Republicans and Democrats alike can all decide, hey, there needs to be really clear rules of the road here.
Mr. Freedman, what should be the appropriate balance of power between the states and federal government in regulating marijuana?
Thank you for your question, Representative. I believe that in essence, it should be that states lead here and the federal government aids. We're at a critical point where that really can come true. If you look at things like Representative Mace's States Reform Act, that's the exact sort of framework put together. And by the way, congratulations on the one-year anniversary of the Reform Act. Really what we're looking for here is one of the positives about this very strange way cannabis legalization has grown is that states have created very unique systems that meet the character and complexities of their own communities. That should not go away because legalization comes in. And so the ability to layer onto that some amount of uniformity so that a consumer in one state knows they're getting the same product in another state, some amount, the correct science and data. So if it turns out that having a history of mental health illness goes poorly with some sort of potency limit, we can therefore start to roll back those products. Having that basic level of science and data from the federal side can aid the states in getting it right. And I think even if you talk to the states, and I've worked for dozens of them, even if you talk to them, they're actually looking for that from the federal government. That would not be an encroachment on how they want to do it. They still want to control the time, place, and manner, but they are looking to the federal government to add that basic level of common sense guardrails.